Привit and greetings from Kiev. I'm here in my favorite area, Golden Gate, where many of my clients prior to Russia's invasion of Ukraine have bought property. It's one of my favorites. It's like a cool hipster area, lots of cafes and bars. And I've been receiving many messages in the last 2 weeks from consulting clients about buying property here in Kiev. Now that might seem mad to a lot of people. Connor, there's a war going on, and yes, indeed, there is definitely a war going on here in Ukraine. We have occasional air alerts, and obviously you've probably seen rocket attacks on Kiev and Odessa in the news. But the fighting is a good bit away from Kiev. It is concentrated in the east and south of the country, also a bit away, a couple hours away from Odessa. So the question is, can you, first of all, buy property here in Ukraine at the moment when there's a war going on? Can you get an amazing deal if you're interested in buying property and taking on, obviously, the risk that involves buying in a country that's at war? Let's go and find out while we take a stroll here in Golden Gate in this lovely area. Поехали!
SAR Experience.
Now, before the invasion, I was running a program called Slavic Utopia Secrets Ukraine. And a lot of the guys were buying property here because they planned to move for 3 to 12 months per year to Ukraine. And I'll put a link to it down below in the description in case you're watching this in the future. And we will be rerunning the program going forward because I am confident, as I predicted on day 30 of this war, that Russia would lose. And here in Kiev, obviously, around that time, a little bit afterwards, it was clear that the Ukrainians had won the Battle of Kiev and Russian forces retreated far away from here. So, first thing to talk about, I guess, is it possible to buy property here? Yes, they did close the register for real estate transactions at the beginning of the war, but it has been open for quite a while. And there is a low volume of transactions that's taking place, but there definitely are a lot of deals, a lot of some around discount, we'll say 20 to 30%. If you see something like 80% fire sale, be suspicious of that because that is not typical for the market at the moment. There is a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but there was an issue obviously with fraud in Ukraine occasionally with real estate transactions. So I have another video about the most common scams up above in the card down below in the description. Just be careful of that. It's not going to be that crazy different in terms of price. And I'll just give you a little bit of a sample of some of the real estate properties, apartments here in Kiev, down in Odessa. I have been working that before the invasion, before there's the tension, actually pre-invasion in Ukraine. Give you a bit of a sample about the types of properties that my clients were buying here and guys who are moving here to Ukraine. One is in Odessa, in a historic building. That's going to be pretty similar to what you get around here if you look around, nice townhouses. And also in Kiev, in a new building that we were looking at, newer building, not a historic building, that's in another area called Limpinski. So there are two that I'll give you a little bit of sample of that I have been filming before the invasion.
Wow. Oh my. This does not look like it's obviously the same building, but what a difference.
Maybe you already have a property, you're wondering about Airbnb prices. They are about half what they would normally run at. That's to be expected because obviously there are very few international tourists coming to Ukraine at the moment. Normally would be thronged here in Kiev at this time of year. Whilst there are plenty of people out in the street, very few of them are speaking in English or another foreign language. So very few foreign tourists, that's to be expected. And of course, we would assume that will go back to normal going forward. But for now, definitely rental prices are about half, I would say, for short-term rentals. So now some of the factors that are going to determine whether the prices are increasing or decreasing here in Ukraine due to the invasion are the fact that sadly many Ukrainian cities in the east have been destroyed, and especially the stock of apartments and houses, of course, has been very badly depleted. You've probably seen the images from Mariupol, for example, where it looks like about maybe 60 to 90% of the housing is damaged and will have to be leveled. Also, there's smaller cities like Volnovakha. Mariupol had a population of about 450,000 pre-war. Volnovakha about 100,000. You've probably seen Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. That was also a conurbation of about 250,000 people. So those people will need new homes. And whilst many people have gone abroad, we have about 5 million refugees who have left Ukraine, mainly women and children. There's actually another 5 to 6 million people who are internally displaced here in Ukraine, and they will need places to live. So obviously that would put a pressure on housing, maybe that would be an increasing factor. But as I mentioned, then we got the people who've left. So that's obviously a factor that's going to drive down prices in theory. I mentioned that foreign tourists are not here. Well, obviously foreign investors are not going to be coming to buy property here like they were pre-invasion for a while. And also people who are planning to relocate probably postpone those plans. Hey, thank you. Obviously foreign investment down, there's less people investing in the property, especially in particular I think in the center of Kiev, because there were a lot of foreigners who were moving here. I was helping many of them who were my clients, so that's going to be a factor obviously that pushes down the price. The World Bank, another factor, the World Bank has predicted that the Ukrainian economy will contract from between 40 to 50% in 2021 due to the invasion, and that's of course another factor that's going to have a big influence on how much money people have to pay for property. And maybe you're going to have, as a correlate to that, many Ukrainians who are going to sell, in particular, say if they have a second or third property that was kind of like a savings account, they may decide now is the time to offload that and get their hands on some cash. Also, you could say that many Ukrainians might decide that they want to move abroad permanently and not come back, maybe set up businesses abroad, especially from the areas that have been devastated. That will mean, again, that there will be a downward factor on the price of property. So in the 3 years prior to the invasion, the price probably had been slowly increasing here in Ukraine on average. And I would say now, when I look at the discounts that you can get for people who are trying to sell property, it's probably about a discount of 20 to 30%. That would bring it back down to, say, pre-COVID prices, around that late 2019, 2020 prices, more or less. And I guess the big question for a lot of people who are considering taking a risk on investing in property in Ukraine, because it is discounted compared to before, is going to be how long will the war last? How bad will it be? Will cities like Kiev or somewhere else that you're thinking of investing, like Odessa, be leveled or seized by Russia? And whilst I don't think that's going to happen, if the war were to drag on past the autumn, then probably we would see prices decline further. If it runs into next year in particular, if the conflict were to end sooner than that, by the end of autumn, then possibly prices will not decrease dramatically further. I also expect that there will be a big kind of like Ukrainian version of the Marshall Plan post-World War II. There'll be a lot of foreign money that will be invested to rebuild Ukraine afterwards, rebuild its infrastructure. So that was something that maybe would indicate that going forward that prices would increase in a few years again when the economy recovers. So that is my little spiel, my little video today about buying property potentially here in Ukraine. If you see something that's 80% off in the center of Kiev. As I was talking to my lawyer, helps me with these investments. The other day, he saw something like that, and then it turned out to be a scam, it looks like. So, yeah, just be wary of that. If something is too good to be true, then possibly it isn't. And in any case, if you have more questions, you want some bespoke advice about what's going on here in Ukraine, down below you have a link to my consulting. So I'm going to leave it at that and bid you a гарного вечора, which is a lovely evening. Slava Ukraini, Haram Slava. Ciao ciao from Kiev, Ukraine.
SAR Experience.